my name's Dan, and in this video I'm going to put together quite a few things about using user interface using Unreal Motion Graphics, otherwise known as widget blueprints. It's going to be a bit of a longer video because I'm going to do a whole load of stuff from scratch, so please bear with me, and I'm going to show you two different ways of being able to switch on and switch off elements in your user interface and your heads-up display and whatever you've got. Let's describe what we've got. We've got a standard third-person template map, and we've got a widget that I created in the last of this series of videos, which was showing how to do binding. And in this, we've got a thing that shows our elevation in the world. We've got a timer showing that. We've got a quit button, and they're all wired up, so they should work. So let's just do a quick demo of that, hopefully. So we've got the timer in the top right ticking away. We've got the elevation bar that tells us how high we are in the world, and the quit button's enabled, so we can click it and we can quit. So what I'm going to do is show you how to have a versatile HUD by giving you the ability to switch on and switch off different elements of that. And the simplest thing really here is that in our HUD, basically we take each element that we're thinking of as being one entity. And then we just change the visibility of that. So if we've got the elevation, which is in the vertical box, and then we go over to the right-hand side and zoom in, we should see there's a visibility here is when it's actually set to not hit testable, whatever, but there are various things here. So there's visible and there's hidden. Collapsed is different to hidden because if you've got elements that are it still takes up space if it's in a container where that's important, but you don't actually see it when you make it hidden. If you collapse, it stops taking up the space. As you see, the visibility gives you the ability to do a binding here. So we will be doing that in a little bit, but what I want to do is to set up a system whereby that can happen. And I have searched a reasonable amount to try and find if there's a way of getting other blueprints to directly contact and talk to your HUD and your widgets. There are ways of doing it, but they all seem a little convoluted. So we're going to do this backwards, in that we're going to get our HUD to ask what should be visible, and we can do this with the bindings. This is how bindings are meant to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new game instance class, which is then going to store a state, and we're going to have various different states in which different combinations of things are visible, and we're going to control that through some switches that we can stand on. So let's start by making that game instance. So game instance class is a high-level class. There has to be a game instance inside an Unreal project when it's running, and there is a built-in one which is just called game instance, but you can override it with your own and plug your own version in to add functionality. And this is a great place to put things that you want to persist if you have different levels. It's also easier to communicate with than the level blueprint. So we're going to create a blueprint class. We're going to click on all classes and do game instance. Found game instance. I'm going to select that. I'm going to call it Dan instance. So I have a habit of, when I create things in a project, not just in Unreal, in all sorts of programming projects, I have a prefix that I use. It's not always Dan. It depends on the nature of the project. Sometimes it's named after the project. And this makes it easier to find the things that are mine. So it's quite a useful convention. And before I forget, we're going to make sure that our project is using that game instance. So I'm going to go to project settings, and in that I'm going to go to maps and modes, and right at the bottom we've got game instance class, and we want it to use the DAL instance class. So that's now set up, so that's working. It won't make any difference at the moment because there's nothing in the DAL instance class that adds any functionality. The question is, how do we get it to change state? Well, what we could do is have a variable inside DAL instance which holds the state. And one way of doing that would be to use numbers, and just to make it change the number, and then have the whatever's going on in the UI change according to the number that we've got here. There is another way which is similar to numbers, but has a little bit more clarity. So I'm going to show you that. If you know what enumerations are, or enums as they're for short, then you'll understand what's going on here. If not, I'll try and explain this as I go along. So what I'm going to do is create what's called an enumeration or an enum. If you highlight blueprint, get enumeration, and I'm going to call it Dan UI state. I'm going to use that to store the state that our user interface is in. I can add a name to this, so I'm just going to say it's not a name, a bit of a description. Determines, I probably spelled that wrong. Determines the, yeah, I've definitely missed a T out. State of the UI, which is fairly obvious. I'm going to put that T in. There we go. And what this does is it allows us to create effectively like a new variable type, and to limit the values that it can have to a number of named entities. Hopefully you'll see what I mean as we go along. So we're going to, when you type add enumerator, you give it a name, and so I'm going to call this nothing. So one state that we can have is nothing. And another one we're going to have all. So in this state, all three elements are going to be shown. Now I could do all the different combinations. I'm not going to. I'm going to do quit only and timer only. I should zoom in on that. Timer only, and the reason to not zoom in is because finding another one there is slightly more difficult. And we have the elevation only. Okay, so if I create a variable, I can just, because I've zoomed in, I can see the spelling errors here. Determines. Well, was it? If I create a variable of this type, so this is a new type that I've created, then the only values that will allow are these 5 very specific values. And this isn't text, this isn't strings, they're just named entities. And so you're limiting the capabilities here to these things. And it can be really useful because it can add clarity, because you can actually give these things names rather than using numbers. And it can also mean you can't have, so if we were using numbers and we had 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, for example, what happens if somebody accidentally elsewhere in creating another part of the project changes it to 5, and then it's meaningless. Whereas with an enum type, you can't actually set it to something that isn't one of these things that you've defined. So we've created that. I'm going to save this, and then we're going to go back into our DAL instance class. So this has come up with a slightly different interface because there's nothing else going on in here, and it's detected that. And it asked me if I want to open the full interface, and I do. I want a proper interface, so here we go. So I click on that link, and we're going to add a variable, and we're going to call it UI state, and it's going to use the type Dan UI state. Okay, so that that's going to be exposed so that we can change the value of that. We're just going to compile so that we can get hold of the defaults, value. So we're going to set the default value to nothing, that sounds good. All right. So we've got something going on in the game instance. Which side shall I do first? I'll do the switching, so we can actually change the game instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a one of my favorite kind of things, a little pad that you can stand on to do some switching. So I'm going to call it down pad. This is just an actor blueprint. I'm trying to go quite quickly because I'm aware that you probably understand, or you should understand what I'm doing here. I'm going to create a variable inside here, which I'm going to call new state. So what these pads are going to do, they're going to change the UI state that's being held in the game instance. And this needs to be down UI state type. And I'm going to make that an editable variable, and it's going to be set to nothing by default. And whilst we're in here, I'm going to do the event graph. So I'm going to take the actor begin overlap. So that's when the player, in fact anything else, but there's nothing else moving in the game, overlaps that box. We haven't created the box yet, so we better do that. I haven't done the visible stuff here. So let's add a cube, which is the thing that we're going to be standing on, and just change that down to 0.1, so that gives us a pad, and then we're going to add a box collision. And I just tend to lift that up a little bit. I feel like this is so built into all my projects that I should have a starting blueprint that I can start from all this. But anyway, let's get back into the event graph. So on actor begin overlap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that state in the game instance. So I need to get hold of the game instance class. I can do that by doing get game instance. Now, in one of my other videos, I talked about getting hold of what I call the essential blueprints, and game instance is one of those. And when you do that, when you've plugged your own version in, you then have to tell it that actually the type of thing that you're using is my own version. So we're going to need to do what's called a cast to down game instance. That's active. And once we've done that, we can now get hold of that game state. So I'm going to do set UI state was what I called it. There we go. And I'm going to use this variable that I've created, which is new state, to plug in and change that. What I can do is then, this is now a variable that can be edited per pad instance. So different pads can actually change the state to different things, which is a great way to use blueprints. So I've got my down pad. I'm going to put in, how many different states did we actually put in? All. Then one for each of them. So I'm going to have that one as the one that's nothing. So down here on the right hand side, you can see this is the value in that new state variable. In here, I'm going to change it to all. Here, I'm going to change it to quit only. This one is going to be timer only, and this one is going to be elevation only. Right, so we've set all that up. So what this should now do, but I can't verify it just yet, is that it should actually change that state variable that's in the game instance. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the down widget, and we're going to take each of these elements, and we're going to create a binding, and we're going to query the game instance to see what the state is, to see whether this element should be visible or not. So we're going to go into the visibility bind, create binding. So this is given us a little function that we can use. I'm going to break that connection because I need to put some active stuff in here. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. Which element was this that I was doing? I think it was the elevation. So elevation visibility. And I'm just going to double check that by going back into the designer. see that I've got elevation, it's the vertical box, and it's giving me elevation visibility down there. So let's go back to the graph and make some changes. So, right, what we need to do is get game instance. As before, we need to do a cast. So cast to down game instance. And that gives us that variable there. And what I'm going to do is, using this, is because there's not just one that where it's going to, so it's not just the, let's try rewording this. There is not just one state in which we want the elevation stuff to be visible. We also want it to be visible in the all state as well. So possibly the easiest way to do this is to do a switch. And we now we've got the game instance, we need to get the get UI state. Let's do that first. That'll work better. And then we do a switch on that. And switches and enums go really well together. So we can do a switch on the enum, and this will give us an execution out for each of the possible values that we can have for our enum. So it's a great way to use enums. And we're going to have two return nodes. So I'm going to do Control-C, Control-V to get a second return node. So this one is going to return visible, and this one's going to return hidden. And all we're going to do is we plug in the right states to the right return so we get the right value out. So for nothing, it needs to go to return value hidden. For all, it needs to go return value visible. For quit only, we don't want the elevation. For timer only, we don't want the elevation. And for elevation only, we want that out there. Okay. So I'm going to compile that. Right. Now I need to duplicate this to do the visibility for the other things, for the timer and for the quit button. I'm going to actually do something a little clever, I hope, in this. So we've got the elevation visibility function. Basically, our other functions need to be the same, apart from the wiring here needs to be different. So what I can do is I can duplicate this and then give it a different name. I'm going to call this quit visibility. We'll actually call it quite visibility, so I'll rename that again. And then the other one is timer. So I'm going to do another duplicate from here. And I'm going to call it timer visibility. So these functions have been created. They're just not hooked up to the binding yet. But let's sort out the logic of them first. So the timer visibility, the thing that's different is we don't want the elevation to go to the visible. We want the timer to go to the visible output. Okay, and then the quit visibility, once again, we don't want the elevation, but we want the quit. I can put that in there. Okay. Now, as I said, they're not, these two new functions are not bound to the elements yet, but this is where the Unreal interface is really useful. So we're going to get the horizontal box for the timer, and we're going to go for visibility and click binding, and all functions that are in the widget that give you the right kind of output are then listed. And so what we're in the timer, so I can just choose the timer visibility, and on the quit button, I can just choose where's the visibility. This is in a different place, obviously. Don't seem to be able to find it easily, so I'm just going to use the search to find the visibility. And then we can't put that on the quit visibility. The other thing that this means, because we can just plug down from that, you can actually have more than one element bound to the same function to make them work. So if I've remembered everything that I need to do, this now should be working. And so I should be able to change the visibility of the different elements. At the moment, we're set on none, because that was the default value of the UI state in the game instance class. Just going to click F11 to get bigger. So this should be the one that does all. There we are. All have gone on, none, and then we get just the quit button, just the timer, and just the elevation. It is doing exactly what I expected it to do, which is giving us a lot of flexibility. So I promised that I was going to show you two ways of doing things. You may never need this second way. You may only ever want to do it by using these kind of switching elements on and off. But there is a way in the widgets. That's the wrong thing to open. Let's get the widget. There is a control in here which allows you to have possibly several complex HUDs and to switch between them and potentially in different modes to have different HUDs, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually wipe out everything that I've had so far, including the canvas panel, because this probably will be your root widget in your widget tree. And it works a bit like a tab, but it's called like a tab system in a window, but it's called WidgetSwitcher. And so it's a bit like a tab control, but it doesn't actually show tabs. And when you have a set of child widgets to this, it will only let you show one at once. And what you normally would do is then inside this have, say, a canvas panel, and in that canvas panel you might have all sorts of extra elements, but I'm just going to do something really simple. I'm going to just go text in there, and I'm going to... So I'm trying to do this quickly so that you can see what's going on. Let's get into the text block. Why is that not giving me stuff? It's because I've already got Visi in there. So I want to just click cancel for the content. I'm going to call this HUD 0. Fine. So that's just some text that's going to be displayed on the screen. I'm going to have another canvas panel in here. So, and I could have used those previous things. Shall I? Shall I not? Shall I? Oh, go on. I'll go backwards all the way through this and get them all back. So another way of going about this is I can highlight the canvas panel and say wrap with. I'm going to wrap with. Where is it? The WidgetSwitcher. All right. Okay. So I'm going to. What exactly am I going to do? Because I've changed my mind on what I was doing live as I go along, which is not the best thing to do. I'm going to have another canvas panel inside here, which has gone to the bottom, and I might want to reorder that so that it's there. And inside that, I'm going to have some text. I don't care what the text says. Okay, that seems to be trying to move the canvas panel around, so that's just Control Z that. I wanted to move the text block around. Didn't really care. Okay, and I'm going to have a third one just to show that there's three. What shall I put in? I'm going to put in something that's just going to fill the whole screen. And this is completely crazy. You would never do this, but I'll put a progress bar in. So when you highlight that, that gives us the whole screen. So as we're highlighting, we can we look at them one at a time, and it doesn't show the other things, because the point of a widget switcher is that it's direct children. So we've got that canvas panel, and that progress bar can only have at most one of those widgets displayed at once. And this is where I really wish we could what am I going to say? What am I saying? I really wish we could contact the widget from another blueprint. So what I'm going to do in terms of determining how this is used is I'm going to still use that UI state thing. I'm going to add a couple of states, which I'm going to call startup, and yeah, I shouldn't have put that big thing on that takes the whole screen up because you can't see what's going on. Dead. All right, so I'm going to make some changes just because that's less useful than it could be. So go back to the widget, and instead of having that big progress bar, I'm again just going to put some a canvas panel with some text. In fact, what I'll do is I'll duplicate that one and put it to the bottom. No, that's not put it in right. That has. And that text block, I'm going to say welcome. And in this one, I'm going to say you are dead. Okay. So these are, states in which nothing's actually happening, and so your UI is very different. And we're going to be able to put switches in to control this as well. But let's do the widget end of this first. So what I want to do to control which of the WidgetSwitcher children is being displayed, and we're going to go into the graph here and go to the event graph and use the event tick to do this. This is a bit clunky. I wish it was better, but this is where we're going to be. So what do we need to do? We need to get hold of get game instance and cast to down game instance, and then we need to get the state. Get UI state, and we're going to do another switch. We've added cases, so we need to go back into the other ones with startup and dead. Is it going to make a difference? We shall see what happens. It maybe crashes or gives us an error, actually. So we're going to set set current with I'm trying to remember cast to get current widget slot. There's a way of doing this without getting a reference to it, but I have forgotten it, so I'm just going to do self. I can't remember what the name of the widget switcher was, but get set widget switcher, get widget switcher 1005, that's it. And set slot, double slot position, I can't remember what it's called. Current slot used, index, set active widget index. That's what I wanted. So when we're on nothing, that's going to be similar to startup, and when we're on all, or quit only, or timer only, this is getting complicated, or elevation only, it'll do one, which is the one with all the other things in, and then in the last one, I'm going to pull off from dead and change it to 2. So, is this going to work? I really don't know. So something's wrong. Ah, that's because it hasn't got a target. It needs that target for the widget index. Let's try compiling that again. I'm going to put a couple more. In fact, I only need one more pad in because I put it so that none changes it to the startup state. We're going to change that state to dead. I've kind of rushed that, I know, but we've got the welcome on there, and if we go over there, that doesn't change anything. If we go on to all, it puts our interface in. We can still do the switching on and off of the different elements as we did before. But now when I go over this one, it should switch it to you are dead and takes it off. So this is a way of having, as I said at the start of this little bit, separate HUDs for different things that are happening, different states in your game or different game modes. So say you've got a game where you can get into a car like Grand Theft Auto, and you want me to change the HUD when you get into the car, and you so might actually switch game mode, which is one of the essential blueprints as well, or all sorts of ways you might want to control this. This now hopefully gives you a whole load of tools and techniques that you can use to vary what's on your HUD. And in the next couple of videos, I'm going to show you some specific things to do with menus, but that's it from me for now.